Hello, everyone. It's Sylvia Waldman, Canadian immigration lawyer and career and business coach for internationally trained professionals seeking to connect to opportunities in Canada that will support their Canadian immigration goals. So I am live for the first time. I'm figuring out my phone. I'm trying to see about sharing this into my group. Let me just do that. Technology. I'm doing everything wrong that you're not supposed to do on a live stream. I'm using my phone, it's shaky and all that fun stuff. So let me just share this. Yes, so let me share this into my group. And then, now I love technology. It's saying that I have a weak connection. So I don't know how this will actually end up sounding. But we will just go for it and hope for the best. So I wanted to pop on this morning. I keep saying this, I am going to start doing very regular live streams, little tidbits, as I call it, of information, maybe 10 to 15 minutes tops, where I try to address certain questions that I keep getting in terms of posts and emails. And again, disclaimer, because I am still a lawyer, what I'm telling you on these live streams is not specific legal advice about your particular situation, because I don't know what your particular situation is if you're listening, but it is general information. I mean, that is applicable in certain types of scenarios. So the scenario that keeps coming in my inbox and in my messengers and in my posts is the situation where somebody's asking me, well, I have a chance to work in Canada, and so what should I look out for in terms of the working opportunity, and what's the difference between coming to Canada as a worker or coming to Canada as a permanent resident. So, I mean, in short, there are tons, millions, thousands, whatever opportunities that one can find about coming to Canada and working. Now, whether or not they are legitimate is for you to figure out. Now, the kind of phrase I use is buyer beware. It's like anything else. On some level, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If it's an opportunity that seems too simple without having to provide, for example, your resume, your skills, your proof of your language abilities in the form of an IELTS, or if it's a French, the TEF, it is probably not a legitimate opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean that if that is the case, that I am telling you that it's not a legitimate, that if you haven't been asked for your resume, if you haven't been asked for your English or French abilities, I'm not saying that it is not a legitimate opportunity. I'm just saying that these are kind of the markers when I would be advising somebody to really be looking for. Employers in Canada have to prove why they cannot hire a Canadian or a permanent resident for a job before they start hiring foreign nationals, right, or foreign workers. So basically, you've got to think about it. What would an employer have to do to prove that? They normally have to advertise for at least a month. They have to have a detailed job description of what the job is, and then they have to, indicate, it might not be necessarily the specific worker, it depends on the process they're going through in Canada, but the kind of workers they need and the kind of skills they need, and it almost normally involves some level of education beyond high school, and it almost always involves some level of proving the English or French abilities of the person who, the worker wants to bring to Canada. The other thing you really have to think about is when a lot of these agents, or whether it's a lawyer or a consultant, if they claim they are, you should verify that with the bodies that you can check. Lawyers are licensed provincially, so every province has a law society. In Ontario, it's considered the Law Society of Upper Canada. It's Ontario, but it's called Upper Canada. And every province has a licensing body for lawyers, and for consultants, it's a little bit trickier. There is it's a national body for regulated consultants, so immigration consultants. That said, you have to keep in mind that if a consultant is advertising, or a lawyer is saying, I have these jobs available for these employers or this employer, the issue becomes that person is not working for you, or they shouldn't be, in the sense that who are they working for? If they are working for the employer, there's an issue of what we would call in Canada conflict of interest on some level. they're not working for you. They may have the ultimate goal of helping that employer find workers to fill these jobs, but you have to keep in mind that technically speaking, they're probably being paid they should be being paid by the employer. So they really shouldn't be asking you for money for the same job. Now they might say, I'm going to charge you for making sure your resume is correct, or making sure, whatever your file is correct for presenting to the employer or presenting to the embassy, I guess, when you're applying for a work permit. But again, you've got to keep in mind that would be a conflict of interest on some level. The employer may have a different goal than you on some level, in the sense that the employer wants to make sure the workers that are being brought over, fit all the requirements for the program for bringing temporary foreign workers over. You as a person who wants to get to Canada to work may or may not have the same goals. I'm not saying that people lie in their documents, but I mean, you may feel compelled to present your your credentials in a certain way. So you're going to have different goals, and that person should not be representing the employer, and you, for example. So when I get these posts and questions and all that, these are the kinds of things that I really let people know about when, or to think about when they're asking me this. Think about, has this person, whoever, who is this person that's posting this job or these jobs? Really check them out. Just because a friend heard about this guy and they helped another guy doesn't mean that it's all legitimate. Really check it out and think, does this make sense? Find out who the employer is. I mean, is this a legitimate employer? You can verify a lot of things now through the internet, through LinkedIn, through websites. Now, people can make up websites, but look at the website. Does it make sense? Is there an address? Is there proper information for the employer? You should get to know what a legitimate company looks like, what a legitimate company website looks like, and what one doesn't. Are there key employees listed? Are there key emails listed? Is there a telephone number? Is there an address? Does that address match Google Maps? You can check what address is this when you check on Google Maps. Is it a building that makes sense for this company? Or not? Or is it like a mailing, a post office box? That doesn't mean it's not a legitimate company. But again, these are the kinds of things you should be really thinking about before you consider, paying money or applying for a job in Canada that's just to come as a temporary worker, for example. So when you're coming as a temporary worker, you're just coming as that. You don't have the rights of a permanent resident. You are linked often in these scenarios to the employer. And like I said, you're putting yourself in a on some level in not the greatest situation when you're coming over on a work permit. Although it might seem ideal, it's like the immediate getting to Canada, you're not in the strongest position necessarily. Now, I say that because, of course, people who have come do transition to permanent residence, and that's, the way that Canada, the Canadian immigration policy seems to want it on some level, that you're linked to an employer who will then support your permanent residence goals within, usually after a year that you've worked for this employer. But what happens if it doesn't work out, right? You're kind of stuck. You don't have tons of options when you're just a worker. The other option is when you are coming as a permanent resident, you have the right to work for any employer. You've jumped through all the hoops that you had to jump to prove your English, to prove your skills, like all the things that I talk about on my other live streams and all the things I talked about in my email Canadian job search challenge that I did for 5 days, where I emailed out people who signed up for it. I think I'm going to run it again soon, and I'm going to run it with more information and videos. But, all the kinds of things that you need to do to be Canadian job ready. You can't just be applying for jobs if you haven't prepared for all the things you need to prepare for your English, proving your English, proving your French, proving your foreign education, having a proper Canadian style resume, all these things. And essentially, these are the things that you'll need for permanent residence goals anyway in the express entry management system, which is the system that all skilled worker applications are generally being managed under. Keep in mind, provinces are also creating their own kind of sub-express entry kind of management systems, but it's all, online in the computer system, and it's all asking for basics, and these are the basics: proving your language skills through, third-party documentation with the IELTS, proving your French skills, proving your education that it's equivalent to whatever it is in Canada, whether it's a college degree or a university degree. These are the things you can't get around. There are no shortcuts. So essentially, that is the answer for what's the difference between coming, as a worker and what's the difference coming as a permanent resident. If you're coming as a worker, you're typically, tied to a specific employer. You don't have the automatic right to become a permanent resident. Of course, this is usually the transition towards it, but it's not necessarily the transition for it. There are different programs and different provinces that have different programs that keep changing. For example, your skill level is a big thing. If you're coming over at a skill level of A, you will have different opportunities, right? If you're coming over, there are a few provinces now that have for what we call the C-level jobs or the D level, which are like farm workers or like, chambermaids as they call them, working in customer service. I mean, there are some opportunities like that, not many, and they're so specific to the provinces that have them, and they're so specific to what the requirements are. Typically, you have to have family in that province. You, again, are tied to an employer, but like I said, a legitimate employer. And if you get caught up in some scheme where somebody's bringing you to Canada and it's not proper, I mean, you're ultimately the one that's going to pay a very heavy price. You may end up being able to repair it by hiring lawyers and all that kind of stuff, but you really don't want to go there. So that's the temporary worker side. The permanent resident side, if and when you can make it this way to Canada, the difference is you're coming a permanent resident. You have all the rights to work and study anywhere you want in Canada, and you're not necessarily tied unless you came through a specific province and you indicated you would be living in a certain province. That's a little bit different, but basically you're one down from a citizen in that sense. So hopefully the tips have been helpful to anybody who's getting these kind of offers or seeing these kind of offers. And again, my points are not that there aren't legitimate opportunities for people to be recruited and to come to Canada to work with work permits. My point is to really be, as the potential person who's coming that way to Canada or has that who's being presented with that opportunity, it's really you should really take the time to really consider and do your own investigation of the person who's offering you this, meaning the agent or whatever you want to call them, recruiter. What company do they work for? Who are they? Google them. Find out what you can. Don't go by just what somebody says to you that he helped a friend and it all worked out. I mean, yeah, if I had a penny for all the times that people like that came into my door who had serious immigration problems because they told me that they had listened to the friend of the friend who told them this other guy really helped them out, except now that they were, being deported or they were on the verge of being deported. So really do your own homework on the person who's offering you this kind of opportunity, and then do your own homework on the employer and, looking at who's this employer, what are the requirements of the job, and do you really fit the job, and is this recruiter person or is the employer, asking you for the kinds of things that they would normally have to ask for? Proof of your English ability, not just by speaking, but proof through, documentation. Even though it might not be a formal requirement, it kind of is at the level of applying for the work permit at the embassy. At the embassy, it's really important that your file for any work permit be very well documented. So it's not going to be enough normally for an agent to just say, don't worry, just apply for the application. You don't need to prove all that. That's not really true if it's a legitimate opportunity. So hopefully that was helpful. Some people that are asking me these questions, I hope that at least addressed some of that. Again, it's not specific legal advice for your particular situation because I don't know your facts. People that want specific legal advice can hire me for a consultation. You can email me info@svaldman.com if you do want to set up a legal consultation, and if not, of course, you're free to go on your own instincts and free to go on what I've just talked about generally in terms of general information on this live stream. So if you found this helpful, and if you are watching my live streams, if you're part of my Facebook group, if you're part of my email lists that are going out, feel free to share this video with anybody you think that might find it useful, helpful, and want to connect with me. Again, my name is Sylvia Waldman. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer and a career coach and business coach for internationally trained professionals seeking to connect to opportunities in Canada that will support their Canadian immigration goals. Have yourself a wonderful day. I might pop in a little bit later with some more announcements because I'm working on a lot of things for the next few months to provide useful information, and I'm also creating an online e-course, but that's for another live stream. So have a wonderful day. Take care.